we would not be providing you solutions, not because we are not capable of providing solutions, not because we are ill-read, but because simply of the fact that there are no solutions. Okay? There are no solutions. And if you are looking at any textbook on ethics, you will find that they deal with problems, they give you points of view, and they'll put a full stop and say, that's it. So there are no solutions as such. What we are doing now is providing you the theories which deals with these problems. So basically we are there to give you insights into the various theories that you implicitly use in your practice. You see, to make the matters more clear, Newton did not allow free falling bodies to fall to the center of the earth. The bodies were falling before Newton. What Newton did was only make explicit what was already implicit. So he was only making explicit a theory that was already there, with which we were fairly acquainted with implicitly, though not explicitly. So that is the job of these 6 sessions that you will be having on philosophy. Namely, we will be making explicit the theories that underlie ethical principles, and also how these ethical principles do not conform with each other. So what one theory says, other theories will say, no, that's wrong. Okay? So that's what we are basically planning to do here. Now, in other words, it's something like this. So you can say that there is practice. Underlying this practice is a theory. Whether you like it or not, every practice has an implicit theory that can be made explicit from the practice. So basically our focus is here, whereas usually as medical practitioners, as researchers, your focus is here. And the whole idea of having this conference is to make your focus shift from here to here. And that's basically what we will be attempting in the next 6 sessions. Now, to make this much more clearer, I take the example of geometry. Now, all of you use geometry, right? All of you must be staying in houses, you must have made tables, chairs, so you use the principles of geometry. Now, there is geometry in practice, but there is geometry in theory, which is called pure mathematics. So there are issues of pure mathematics which a person who is practicing need not be concerned about. So without being aware of these theories, you can still be okay with the practice. Now, if you enter into the theory, then you will see that there are a lot of problems pertaining to what you have been practicing. Okay? Now, what distinguishes you as medical practitioners, as researchers, from us, that is academic students of philosophy, is this, that we get stuck here, whereas you have to move from here to here. Right? You can't simply get stuck here, because if you get stuck here, you'll forget why you need them. Okay? So that's the reason that we are now shifting our focus to this. Take, for example, to give you a very good example, look at the definition of a line that you all have done in a class 10 standard, at least, that a line is a collection or a nexus of infinite number of points. Where we have been using that, and we have been drawing lines all over. Even problematic is the definition of a point. A point is a dimensionless figure, and your teacher said, take a point P, and he drew a point. Now, theoretically, this is very problematic. Why? Because this cannot be a point. Because it has some dimensions. You see, you can measure it. It may have 0.1, but it will have something. So this is not a dimensionless figure. It can't be a point. And neither can this be a line, because a line has only one dimension, length. But no matter how fine your line is, it will always have 2 dimensions. But in practice, we don't use this explicitly. Okay, this is a line, fine. But when you enter into pure theory, underlying the practice that you do, you see that there are a lot of problems which have not been solved. Right? So there are theories which pertain to your practice on a day-to-day basis, right? Which you are not usually bothered with. Now, to give you a similar example, you might be aware that there are more than one geometry, right? There is the Riemannian geometry, geometry of curved surfaces, of which Riemannian geometry is one form. Then you have the Euclidean geometry. All they differ is simply on the definition of one thing, or rather, in a simple agreement whether parallel lines meet or they do not meet. Just change this, if I just draw 2 parallel lines and tell you, do they meet? And for all practical purposes, they don't. That's why you have railway tracks. Right? If they met somewhere, it would be a big problem. But now supposing I tell you theoretically, extended till infinity. Now in theory, that's a problem. Whether they can meet or they cannot meet. Now one way of saying is they meet and you have non-Euclidean geometry. The other way of saying is they don't meet and you have Euclidean geometry. But in practice, when you are laying down railway lines, you are not bothered with these theories, right? But these theories underlie your practice. So that's the point that I want to be clear and put across very clearly and explicitly as far as possible. Because you should not confuse the insights of the problems themselves as the solutions, right? What we are doing is only giving you insights into the theories that our ethical problems are dwelled or jacketed in. Now, however, this relation between practice and theory is not as simple as it appears, because it's not unidirectional. It is not from theories to practice. It's both ways. In other words, your theory, though it determines your practice, a change in your practice may also consequently change the theory. So it tends to flow both ways. That's why a person who practices something should also be aware of the implicit theories that govern their practice, because the flow is both ways. In other words, what I want to say is this. At the end of the session, you will not, if asked if this is ethical, right? If you are given a problem and asked if this is ethical, you may not be able to certify whether it's ethical or not, as you are doing now so very easily. Yes, it's ethical. No, it's not ethical. You may not be able to do this, but what you will gain at the end of the course is this, that you will at least be aware that this term ethical is a really messy term, because it can be used in so many ways and there are so many theories supporting all its various uses that it becomes problematic to come to this firm conclusion that yes, it's ethical, or no, it's not ethical, right? So that's the aim of our course. Now coming to the main point of the session, I would like to bring one thing into account without having further arguments at the present moment, that there is something which is called a distinction between I know and I believe. And this distinction is something which is usually merged. We have to be really careful about this distinction when not here. Here. This distinction is really important here. When I'm saying I know and I believe, there's a huge distinction. If you say I know that P, if I say I know that P, where P can be any expression. I know that this is a table. I know there are 30 people in this room. I know the color of this marks are red. So all these are claims of I know. Now if I make a claim which says I know, any other person who intends also to know P should be able to know P. In other words, any claim which says I know should have a set of justifications. That is what we call, how do you justify it? What is your justification for saying that? Right? So you should have a justification for every no claim. Belief, on the other hand, does not demand such a rigorous justification. I believe it. Now if you keep on saying, why do you believe it? No, I simply believe it. So there is this distinction between a belief and knowledge. So a claim which, when you say I know, must always be supported with something called justification. Now the catch over here is, this justification cannot be simply because I believe it again, because then you will be falling here. If you simply say, of course I have a justification. What's the justification? I believe it, and I strongly believe it. That's not a proper justification, because keeping the nature of the public nature of this claim I know, since it's accessible to all if they want to know, this justification should also be public in nature. So you cannot have private justifications. So I saw it in a dream will not be a justification if it is a case of no. I saw it in my dreams will be a case of belief, and you may even act on your belief. But there is this distinction which in theory you cannot merge. A distinction between belief on the one hand and knowledge on the other. Now, what happens if I say to hell with this? I simply want to focus on this. Then you go back, according to the Western philosophical movement, to the era of pre-enlightenment. That is, you become dogmatic. You do not use your reason. Okay? So, in other words, when you say, I know, this knowledge is never dogmatic. In other words, it always conforms to reason. So, any rational person should be able to see that your justification is in fact a justification of the claim P that you're claiming to know. And that's what separates the Enlightenment from the pre-Enlightenment period. Reason as the basis. Reason as the basis of all knowledge. What does it mean? It simply means this. If you make a claim, say a claim P, that P must be justified on certain grounds which must conform to the reason of each and every rational individual. So if you are a rational individual and I show you my justification for believing in P, you will automatically come to realize that P is true, that P cannot be doubted, that P cannot be challenged. Okay? Now, in cases of ethics, here itself the problem starts. Is ethics here or here? Because if ethics is here, that means if I say a position P is ethical, given the justifications I give for saying P is ethical, if P really is ethical and if it is a case of knowledge, then the justification should appeal to all rational individuals. Okay? Now, is it this or this? Traditionally, till the 20th century, it has been firmly believed that ethical principles are a case of knowledge, not cases of belief. Now, we will see in the later half of our course that in the 20th century onwards, there have been doubts with respect to whether ethics falls here or here. But for the time being, for the majority of your course, you will have to keep in mind that ethics is in this domain. Therefore, the problem of justification becomes very important. How do you justify something is ethical and something is not ethical? And that too, which will appeal to all rational human beings. So it should appeal and conform to the reason of each and every individual who is rational. Now, as in philosophy, as I've been telling you, there are a lot of problems. Now, here itself crops up another problem which I will just mention and sideline it. That is, who is rational? So, when we are saying that it should conform to the rationality of a rational individual, the immediate question is, who is rational? What are the criteria for determining whether an individual is rational or not? And there you land into a different debate in the field of theory, which we will sideline for the time being, and we assume that we all know what rationality means. Okay? So this is why justification is so very important in ethics. Why can't you simply get away by saying stealing is bad, it's unethical? Why does somebody always have to come up and say that, no, it may not be bad? Why does somebody always have to ask you, how do you know? Because when you're making a statement in ethics, you're making a statement of knowledge. And if you're making a statement of knowledge, you better justify it with proper modes of justification. Okay? And basically, we as human beings would like to always say that it's not merely my belief. It's something that is true.